Well, I'm pleased that I made it back. It was, that was the question whether I would make it or not, but I did. So,
Good.
I hope you didn't break too many speeding laws.
uh, no, I did not. I stayed up with traffic and a little less anxious to get home than some of those guys in their big pickups
Oh,
who feel so manly as they move down the highway.
Yeah.
mhm.
It seemed to need a big vehicle to be good about themselves, I guess.
Yeah. Looking down on you, Ernie.
On my little Prius, yeah. Yeah. Actually, no, I was driving my wife's Genesis, but I still got almost 28 miles a gallon. So how about that?
Wow, that's great.
Good.
Yeah, I could handle that.
The Prius would have gotten 50, but well, here's what I'm doing. I'm just going and making sure I'm getting back to a series of files that I have, and just want to pull some of them up to make sure. And I apologize. I have a son that just called too from someplace probably in Africa. And he called, and my wife used my phone to answer it. So
Oh,
because she didn't answer it on hers. So I think I'm going to put up, let's see if what I can do to make this work. See what happens if I put some up. Okay. This is yeah. This covers a little bit what we did last time. And I just want to make sure I have that one.
oh, Glenda joined us tonight.
Yeah.
Wow, good. So, do you want to get started while I keep looking for things here?
Well, Ernie, you're the show. I mean,
On the show. Oh, okay. Well, let me do this. Let me let's see. I can get in here. Yes, sure I am, and I can pull up stuff. Let's see. There we go. That's yours. I got to be careful what I put up here. Reminders, this whiteboard, document one. You don't want that one. Is this going to work? Invitation. That's got my name on it. One reminder. How come it's not up here? Oh, here it is. There we go. Should come up now. See if it does.
something did.
hmm
Let's see if why can't I see? Okay, let's try this. So I should be able to see it, but I don't currently see it. But that's because,
Well, we see a menu.
okay, did I just get rid of it then?
Yeah.
It's gone.
Oh, yeah, okay. It's kind of fun, these things, to figure them out, isn't it? I mean, it is kind of fun, except that I just did something I didn't mean to do.
I do that all the time.
So let's have just a prayer, if we may, a prayer.
Okay.
Okay. I like this one. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates day and night. And he should be like a tree planted by the rivers of water that brings forth his fruit in his season. His leaf also shall not wither, and whatever he does shall prosper. The ungodly are not so, but are like the chaff which the wind drives away. Therefore the ungodly now shall not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the ungodly will perish. That's more of a warning and an invitation than a prayer, but maybe that will do for us right now. So what I want to do is pull up what I had last week, and it should have been very easy. Here we go. I think it's coming right now. So let me try again here. See what I can do. Did that actually come and show up here? It should have. Document 1, 2, 3. Let's close this down for a minute and let's try again. I don't play. Oh, there it is. There it is. Okay. Now, do you see it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and this is the one I used a few weeks ago for a Sabbath school. I'm here, and the other one was at Pacific Union College. So how's that for the COVID-19 wonder? So what we were doing last week was, in some sense, um, let me pull it down here. Now that I know I can get it. What I think we were trying to do, I was trying to do, was to suggest that we had a little 3x5 card that Matthew put together for us for our mental hip pocket that we could remember and recite. And it kind of was like a little roadmap, a little description of how you grow in grace, and a reminder of the rewards, and a promise of God's acceptance right from the beginning. It's a wonderful little piece we looked at. Did anybody have a chance to look at it? I'm not going to ask you if you memorized it. I hope you did.
Bobby did.
Bobby did. Well, very good.
Oh, I'm having trouble with the last one,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
did.
Had you done it before when you were younger?
yeah,
Yeah.
but chemo brain doesn't always work well.
Yeah,
So-
I know. Yeah. Well, I don't know about a chemo brain. I just know an
And
80 an 80-year-old brain. I look at some of you, I think you might be about my age. Some of you might be just a bit older. I'm not sure. But anyway,
You
we're
get
all
old-
up there. We're grateful. Pardon?
Oh, and by the time you get old age and chemo and anesthesia, it does.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing how things that I think I knew, I just can't put my finger on them. I just have to let go and let it drift slowly into my mind. Sometimes after the meeting is over, which doesn't always help so much.
Yeah, day late and dollar short.
Yeah, I have a practice of we distill water, a Popka water, and we get rid of the good minerals, but we get rid of the chlorine, and my wife likes it better that way. So when I'm taking the gallon jug and I'm pouring the gallon distillate in it, I can turn it over and I can recite the Beatitudes. I can do one of Shakespeare's sonnets, or I can do Psalm 1 or Psalm 23, and feel like I'm keeping it alive, even while I'm just filling up bottles.
Mhm.
That's one way to do it, So first, a few things I want to say about the book of Matthew. It's the teacher's book. It's organized. It has 5 lectures, and they're spaced throughout the book. And it's almost like the book could be read out loud, maybe in about 2 hours. And you get to hear a sermon every few chapters, and then there's more stories, and then another sermon and more stories, and so forth. It's designed to give you an illustration of Jesus as teacher, who also practices what he preaches. And a lot of the things that you read in Matthew, in the sermons, Jesus ends up doing them. Like, for example, it says, when they persecute you in one city, flee to the next. Well, Jesus leaves, whatever. And so there are places where that's very important. But I want to remind you how it ends. And I'm not sure that I can say it right. Go ye therefore into all the world. Go ye is plural, of course, you know that. And make disciples of all nations, disciples, teaching them to observe all things I've taught you. So the book ends with an invitation to the missionaries to travel around in the world, and they're going to teach what Jesus taught them and commanded them. And that we have every reason to believe it's what's in the book. That's their manual. They've got the stories. So Matthew 5-7 is the original. It's kind of like the presidential address. We had the slogan in chapter 4, repent, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. In chapters 5, 6, and 7, we get kind of like a summary of the whole thing. And then in chapter 10, we get instructions for the missionaries who are going to go out. And in chapter 13, we get some stories they can use that explain why some people aren't listening very well and why they shouldn't get discouraged. And then we have chapter 18, which gives some instructions to those new leaders in the small churches about how they treated people. And any pastor knows that you spend 5% of your time with, no, I said that backwards. You spend 15% of your time with 5% of the people. Does anybody nod their head and say, you know something about that? If you've been a church elder, whatever. So those people who are the ones that cause the grief, chapter 18 of Matthew says, treat them tenderly. Here's is how you do it. Do it right. There's an appropriate way to do it, and keep that in mind. And real warnings about don't be hard on them. You know, it's really severe if you do. And then chapter 24 and 25 remind us, the missionary and the rest of us, that time lingers and that things haven't happened as fast as we thought they would. And then we're told what to be doing in the meantime while we're waiting, so we will be ready. So you have the parable of the 10 virgins, you know, and you also have the parable of the sheep and the goats. The one was doing it unto the least of these, my brethren, while they were waiting. So that's kind of like the book has a little bit of information in it. And that's important to remember. This is intended to be a textbook kind of. It's almost like a textbook, Matthew is. So when we come to the Sermon on the Mount, we have to remember that up front, again, Jesus puts things up front. He put things up front in 4:17 with the slogan, repent for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. He put things up front in the Beatitudes. That's the first part. And then now he starts unpacking it. And then later on in the Sermon on the Mount, he explains some things, and he has some tricks on us, and he has some surprises. Particularly if you're listening carefully, you say, wait, didn't you say something else about that? Yes, but you weren't paying attention. This is that's how it goes in the Sermon on the Mount. So in the Beatitudes, what we noticed, let's think of what we saw. I'll be quiet. What stood out? Again, about the way it's put together and what you learned as you looked at the Beatitudes from last time. And I'll put them up here now so that you don't just have to look at me if you're so unfortunate to have to be thinking it. Just do that. Here we go. So there they are. Tell me what you see, what you noticed, and maybe we didn't see it all last time. I want you to know that. I can move this. Look at that. With these amazing computers with a touch of a finger, I'm moving it up and down. Wow. How does that work? I don't know, but it does. I never cease to be grateful and mystified by the works of God and then the works of mankind who use the intelligence God gave them. And the two of them together, we live in a marvelous world, don't we? So what do you see? Okay, Bursey, keep your mouth shut for a while. What do you see?
How they're put together, or just what you got out of them?
Both. Start with how they're put together, because that tells us how to get what we get out of them.
I'm still fascinated by the way you have broken them into two sections. The first four, I guess, describing what our attitudes need to be, and the last four describing how we are to act towards others.
I appreciate that. I think in the first half, it's your business with God. In the second half, it's your business with others.
Yeah.
And it kind of ends with almost a prayer, the first half. They hunger and thirst after righteousness. They want to be better people. Okay, that's an important one. Okay, anybody else want to pick up something that you notice? There's kind of a logic there. Don't try to change the world until God softens your heart. You will make a mess. Your rough hands will hurt the tender souls of others as you attempt to straighten them out. And I think you all know what I mean. We've all done that. Good point, Dale. Anything else?
Well, I like the fact that it says blessed, 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 blessed.
Wow. Yeah.
That this is the point that he's trying to make with each one of these, that we are blessed when we do these things, and when we suffer for his sake, that there's a reward for it. And the fact that when we do what Christ has asked us to, that we are blessed, and we will have a reward.
We're blessed, and we'll be even more blessed, right? Yeah, that's a very important point. Those words are so important, that makarioi. And it doesn't mean it's not the act of blessing, but it's the result of God blessing. So
Mhm.
you can say almost how fortunate these are people. How lucky, not well, lucky sounds like fate, but anyway, how fortunate. That's even got some problems that sound like fortune in there, but you know, it's really your point. It's a reward. And yeah, okay, let's keep going at this. There's a couple of things here. I said that if there was one thing that I hope you would never forget, if you forgot everything else, do you remember what it was? Now I'm on trial, because if I didn't make that point clear enough, you don't remember it, I failed. So see
Well,
if
we
you
missed
can bail me out.
last week, so I'm claiming innocence.
Oh, good. That's good. Okay. It starts with, it has, I'll just tell you, it has 5 letters in Greek and 2 letters in English. Do you remember now? My little clue?
Is,
Ah, yes.
We missed that.
Yes. This little is right here. It doesn't say will be,
Mm.
could be, should be, might be. It says, it says is. And that Greek word, I roll right down here. And see, there we go. Right. There's that Greek word right there. Estin. It's almost like Ernest. Estin. Estin is. That is saying so much gospel. And it reminds me, somebody made the comment last week about the 10 Commandments. And I thought, that's a very good point, because the Sermon on the Mount starts with gospel. Blessed are those who are poor in spirit. That is, that they're broken in the presence of God, and they're mourning and so forth. For theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Before they've done anything, before they've accomplished anything. And that reminds me of the 10 Commandments. You remember what the very first word is? We had to learn it, didn't we? I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. So the 10 Commandments began with gospel. I saved you. Now, this is how you act. So, in a sense, this is telling you how to be saved. These first 4 Beatitudes are telling you what a saved person looks like. Now, Dale, they haven't done anything yet. I mean, you notice that. But there is an openness there, a brokenness, a recognition, a willingness to learn, a hunger to be a better person. This is what a saved person looks like. It isn't all about all they've done yet. It's about their attitude in the presence of God as they realize what they're like and are honest about it. And maybe they've had some extra help in seeing that they weren't quite as good as they thought they were. I think I told you, I have friends who keep saying, "Oh, you're such a nice guy, Ernie." I said, "Listen, I have a sermon I'm going to have to preach. I told you this. I'm not as nice as you think." And in the sense, I think the Beatitudes start with gospel, grace, and then they go to grace given to others. See, I think I see that flow, and I think you're so right. Then the merciful, the pure in heart, people who are honest, and people when they give you their word, they're not planning to bail out. They're looking out for you when they look like they're looking out for you. The peacemakers, the ones who will step in the breach and get shot at from both sides if need be, trying to bring peace together, are those who will make the first move. And then those people who have done the right thing and have gotten beaten up for it, as you mentioned. Yeah, so I love the movement from grace and forgiveness of God to a life of openness to others. And even, Dale, I want to suggest also that this word peacemakers, that assertiveness shows up later on in the rest of the Sermon on the Mount. So Jesus is describing people who are going to be salt and light. They're going to be praying for their enemies. They're going to be bringing peace where they go. They're not looking out for number one. They're looking out for God's sake, for his other children who might need a little help. Well, that was the end of the sermon, but there's more here. One of the hard parts is the reward. When you get down to blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And we talked about that when you marry the boss's daughter, if you stay married, the boss is going to give to his daughter and you some of those, maybe you'll be the ones who will take over the business if he's only got one daughter, okay, only one child, and you marry her, and he's counting on you. So I mean, the poor in spirit get the whole 9 yards. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So what more can God give? What a gamble. You know, we'll dangle it out, give you a little bit more. 90 days, we'll raise you a nickel. After a year, a quarter. We'll go from $10 to $15 and see if we can get more people to come back to the restaurant. Whatever we do to induce people, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now, isn't that just countercultural? So opposite. God must trust people in ways that are unbelievable for us. He takes a gamble. I call it the gamble of grace. Look what he does. He says, yeah, come on in. Just stay with me. Just stay with me now. And let me work with you. And you work with me. And we can do something in this world. You can be a light. You can be, you can bring zest. You can be the salt that makes life interesting for others. So I look at this as just amazing little plant, this little seed that just blossoms everywhere. So pardon me for getting too excited, but you can see you see what's all there when you get thinking about it. Boy, you could, this is really good. See, it's worth remembering, isn't it now? So you can reflect on these thoughts. That's why you memorize it. Okay. All right. I've carried away far too much here, but I thought I had to come back and at least nail it down so that you would be able to hold on to it. We all noticed that that is only about the kingdom, and the kingdom is a bookends, all that's in between, being called the inheritors of God, seeing God, getting mercy, being filled with righteousness. Oh boy, to be the right kind of. We always talk about, you know, my goal is to be a better version of myself. Well, that's what this is about, but not as I see it, but as God sees it. And he has a better picture of me than I do. So, okay. And I think too, somebody early on, who was it last week, talked about how countercultural it was. The meek, the ones who are likely to get walked over, will inherit the earth. They will get the lakeshore property, not the millionaires who come in and buy all the frontage. That sort of thing, you know, where if you have a lot of money, you can take up the whole best spot and leave others with maybe not a whole lot. And that was very true in Jesus' time. There were large landowners through Palestine, and many of them were absentee landowners, big corporations, so to speak. They owned land and people worked on them like serfs. And they didn't own necessarily property very much. Many people would like to have. Okay.
Ernie, before you move on, I'm just looking at the last four, and I understand that towards people, we're to show mercy, we're to be pure in heart. So I guess that means honest, we're to be peacemakers. But the fourth one there, how do you say that in relation to other people?
Well, what I think he's saying here, actually, notice that fourth one is so characteristic of the world in which these people live. They did not live in a democracy where in our country you can wear what you want, you can go to church where you want, you can believe what you want, you can tell other people about your God. They lived in a different setting, and every book of the New Testament, almost without fail, maybe one or two, recognizes that the people who are receiving the book are likely to get ostracized, penalized, fired, maybe lynched, certainly vulnerable in many ways by both Jews and Romans, because they preached a crucified Messiah. And that's why you notice for righteousness' sake there, but down here it comes Blessed are with you, for they persecute you for my sake. You notice persecution shows up. Persecution here, persecution there, persecution there. It's really a big deal. And we are so fortunate. We are just simply not persecuted. But, people can reproach you. They can slander you because of your faith. Peter says, make sure when they say bad things about you, that's not true. Make sure, make sure that when they say bad things about you, that your life is a different witness. So I think that's the emphasis there. For doing the right thing, you get persecuted for, and what I think the Sermon on the Mount shows, Dale, is as you get into chapter 5, I think it's quite clear that the best ways, if I connect the dots in chapter 5, the best ways you can be the light of the world is to have someone mistreat you, or some company mistreat you, or some organization mistreat you, and the way you respond assertively, but not hostilely. In other words, it's not saying you have to lie down and let them walk all over you, but it is saying that the way you respond when someone does something against you is probably a golden opportunity, because that's where you part real company from basic human nature, in which it says, as someone that we all know said, if you hit me, I'm going to hit you harder. There are a lot of people who operate that way. Countries operate that way. Jesus actually didn't talk about hitting back. He talked about doing something that was creative, that would, in a sense, make peace, and make peace between you and the person, but also help the person to make peace with God. And here's the right reason why, Dave, when we get on the next one, he says, you've heard that it was said, whoever kills shall be liable to the judgment, but I say to you that whoever is angry with his brother shall be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother shall be liable to the council, and whoever says, you fool, will be liable to the fires of hell. Okay, now we got it. If you're mad at somebody else and you're mouthing off at them and sending them to hell, so to speak, describing their mother and whatever, that person who does this is the one who's in danger. So Matthew says this, and whoever does this shall be liable to the fires of hell. Therefore, if your brother is upset with you, go and make peace with him. Now, you go and make peace with him. You say, well, that's because he's so mad he might hurt me. But if you listen to the therefore right in front of that verse, and we could have to look at a text to look at it. I'm looking at Matthew chapter 5, real quick. It's the very first of his illustrations. Yeah, here it is. So it's the so, and actually in the Greek, it's therefore, meaning let's make it apply. Your brother's in trouble because he's so mad at you. He's in danger because of the way he's acting. He's cutting himself off. So you be the person who tries to make peace with him. You might not make peace, Baudale. You might get banged on the side of the head for trying. So I think Jesus is trying to cover all the bases here. Did I get anywhere near what you were thinking about?
Well, I think so. What I have, I guess I've taken away from this is might be another way of saying, well, if you're going to be persecuted, and very likely you will be, at least make sure it's for something that you did that was righteous.
Yes, you and First Peter would absolutely agree, because First Peter is all about living in a persecution state, and he makes that point just as succinctly as you have. Okay, so I think there's maybe one or two. That's a very important point. This is probably where we're at some advantage from Jesus' original hearers, who lived constantly in the threat of being arrested, constantly in the possibility of having their house torn down, constantly in the possibility of being beaten up. Mobs don't think. They work on the basis of emotion. And we just look at Paul going around and we see that, and we think of others. So, and most of these people lived in the inner cities, in 3-4 story high apartment buildings, where they were right in the fishbowl. Everybody could see what they did. It's kind of a different social world. They didn't have any lawns and long driveways. They all packed together, and they meet in people's homes, so they couldn't hide very well. And that was, they were under constant public observation. And when they didn't show up for the big festivals in honor of a certain god or something, their absence was conspicuous. So you see that all the way through, I think, in that kind of a setting. We do not live in that kind of a world. At least we don't now. Okay. I would like to see if you can move, if you have a text with you. What I like about the Sermon on the Mount is it gives you this whole grand picture of the ladder of moral development and the flowering of what happens when you become a blessing. Blessed to be a blessing. How about Dale? Does that sum it up? Blessed to be a blessing. Yeah. So now, now if you look on a little further on there, there's this amazing verses 13 to 16. He says, ye, I know I'm quoting my King James, ye, that's plural, ye collectively are the salt of the earth. Have you ever heard someone described like he or she's the salt of the earth? That's a phrase. Ever heard it used? What kind of a person is the salt of the earth?
Moral, upright person.
Pardon?
Wonderful.
The kind of person
Good, upright person.
Yeah. Sabbath afternoon, I listened to a memorial service for a dentist in New Mexico. I used to grade his algebra papers in high school. He had a remarkable life, very energetic fellow, very good athlete. But, everybody loved Harvey Weber. Harvey Weber was the salt of the earth. Everywhere he went, he looked out for people, had fun doing it too. So, salt of the earth, see if my clock here it's not set properly. It's my grandfather's clock from Newfoundland. I got to get it set properly. It's very interruptive. But the salt of the earth, it's kind of puzzling because he says, you're the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, it's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under feet of men. Some of you from New England, can you think about salting the sidewalk? Maybe Minnesota, if you're from there. But in Palestine, what it appears, I was a chemistry major. Salt doesn't lose its saltiness. Well, they would cut it out from the hills there, and it would have perhaps potassium chloride and then sodium chloride, and the sodium would leak out first and leave the potassium chloride, and that wasn't any good to use. So that's a chemist's explanation, if it was intended to be taken in the literal sense. So salt of the earth, keep your saltiness. Extremely important, Jesus says. What was the function of salt in Jesus' time? Anybody have any ideas?
Well, it was a preservative for one thing.
Those Newfies used to salt the fish, didn't they? Yeah.
Salt preserves, salt seasons. Salt is no good if it stays in the shaker. Salt is counterproductive if it gets too much in one spot. There's just a lot you can do with the salt.
Very good. Very good. So to be the salt of the earth, you got to get out of the salt shaker.
But not too much. Not too much in one spot.
Yeah, little problem when you get 3,000 Adventists in one place. They may not be. Somebody said that heaven has about 4 billion cubic miles of space in New Jerusalem, so that the saints won't get in each other's way up there. I'd like to think it's because there'll be a lot of people up there. So you've got that salt, but you notice this is one of the 2 places in the sermon where Jesus identifies his disciples. Remember, he's talking to his disciples. Who are these people? What is their name? What shall they be called? Seventh-day Adventists? Disciples of Christ? What name did Jesus give them? He said, I'm going to call you the salt of the earth. And then he went on to say, and you are the light of the world. So a follower of, that's a denomination in itself. The salt of the earth, the light of the world denomination, the ones who follow Jesus and have a mission. So you have an identity there, but the identity is about being a blessing to the world. You are identified, you're blessed to be a blessing. And so here you are, salt of the earth, light of the world. And in that context, salt preserves, salt gives flavor, and the light, I somewhere have a right in reach here. Where is my little candle, wow, it's not here. Not in reach anyway, I should. But a little lamp, a lamp. And I think one of the mistakes we make in reading Sermon on the Mount and others is we think that it has to do with missionaries that are traveling all over the world. It had that role, but when Jesus said, a city on a hill cannot hide, cities also can't move. They're stuck. There they are. They're there to be observed always. On a hill, they can be seen. So I think that the Sermon on the Mount and most of Christians, they stayed in one place. They had jobs to do. They weren't funded like Paul. Paul was called an apostle. Not everybody was supposed to do that. But people who lived in these cities, which, by the way, poor people did, inner cities, with streets as narrow as the space between the hallways in Forest Lake Church or any dormitory, and the 3 stories right up, the way they lived was the witness that they were. So he says, in so many words, you are the light of the world. Oh, wait a minute, I thought Jesus was the light of the world. Well, in chapter 4, Matthew reminds us that a light is shining. The light is shining. Well, Jesus is the light, that's clear, but you are the light of the world. And by the way, it's plural, a community of faith, not only an individual, but a community of faith. And John will go on to say the way those community members live with each other can be observed. How they treat each other is impressive to onlookers, as well as how they treat the others. And so when we get into the rest of chapter 5, the very first example that Jesus will give of good works will be the brothers making peace. That will be the very first illustration. The last ones will be dealing with the enemies. And in between, there are 3 others. So when we talk about the idea of being a city on a hill, in a real sense, these people lived in a fixed location and they were observable. So I like what he says. He says, no one lights a flashlight and puts it under the bed. They light a flashlight and they hold it up and shine it around the room to see what's, to find their way into the restroom or maybe whatever else, what we use flashlights at night for, those of us older folk. So the flashlight is never to be hidden. It's always to be used. Their little candles with their little wax, their little oil, they would be set in little niches in their house. And obviously they weren't like the lights I have here. I have 4 lights overhead that are shining down on me and giving me a nice halo on my head. Theirs were little lights, but still able to shine in the building. So he says, no one lights a lamp and puts it under under a basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. And a city on a hill cannot hide. Yeah. So we got those 2 things. And a lamp can't be hid. You shouldn't try to hide your light. Therefore, so let your light, and that's plural, shine in such a way that other people will see your good works. Oh, now we're in Adventist territory here. Good works. Not works to be saved, but works of mercy, Dale, works of peace, works of love. And what are these works look like? Now, I can't believe that Jesus would just leave us hanging there. Good works. Yeah, good works. Okay, let's imagine what they might be. Well, there's a reason why he doesn't leave us there, because we would be inclined as religious people to think, well, my good works would be when I would walk past the library at the university and my professors would see me and my children on our way to the little Adventist church down there in New Haven when I was going to Yale University. You know, look at this Adventist. They notice this. No, it wasn't about religion. It wasn't about fasting, and it wasn't about those kind of things. What were the good works? Well, if you want to look at them, these are the good works in the rest of the chapter that are the good works Jesus has in mind that lead other people to glorify your Father. They praise. See, in a family, when you show up for graduation for your kids, your friends will say, hey, congratulations to the parents, because they know they had a part in it. The parents get congratulated for what the kids do. God gets praise for what his children do in his name. So the children, your Father, you do these works, and God gets praised because he's your Father. He's the one that showed you how to do it. He's the one that's helped you in this new experience of grace and love. So with the very first one that we look at, I already said, has to do with something else that's going on. And in between verse 16 and verse 20, Matthew wants to clarify something that can easily be misunderstood. Don't think that I've come to abolish the law and the prophets. I didn't come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For whoever relaxes one of the least of these commands shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever teaches them and so forth will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness, there's that word again. Unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you'll never enter the kingdom of heaven. Well, that didn't get you awake. It should. What he was trying to say was, I'm going to lay out some things here, but don't think that I'm walking away from the 10 Commandments. Don't think I'm walking away from what God has taught. And the least of these commands are not going to be the ones that Jesus gives. So a lot of people wonder, you have heard that it was said, but I say to you, you've heard that it was said, but I say to you, you've heard that it was said. He says that 5 times. Actually, you want to translate it something like this. You've heard that it was said to the men of old, and now I'm telling you. I'm unpacking it for you. It isn't like I'm setting it aside. Like, okay, let's try the first one here. You've heard that it was said, whoever kills shall be liable to judgment. But I say to you, or I should get rid of the but there because it's a very soft adversative. And now I tell you, whoever is angry with his brother shall be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother shall be liable to the council. And whoever says you fool shall be liable to the fires of hell. Oh, boy. Well, you think about that for a minute. 2 guys in the bar. One's on one political party and one's on the other. Or maybe there's one lady in there they both like. Whatever it is, they're in the bar having an argument. And things are getting heated. And insults are starting to be given. And what ends up is the paper the next day said there was a shootout in the parking lot. And one guy finished the other one off. Maybe they both are in the hospital. In other words, if you can almost see a progression there, if whoever hates his brother, whoever insults his brother, whoever calls him a fool, we are going to be moving toward murder anyway. Often in the real world, troubles often start when people pass insults. They They're angry with each other and they say things they should never say. They do things they should never do. And so Jesus is actually saying the crime of murder began in your brain when you became angry and you started diminishing that other person and you consigned them to hell.
Mhm.
And then guess what? In a real sense, the spirit of murder is already in your heart. Your father, the devil, has got you for the moment. And so you'll see Jesus doing that. He's making it practical, kind of in a stepwise way, but also reminding us that it isn't just the deed, it's what's in your head and then your mouth, and then things happen. And he goes on to the next one, which he talks about. You've heard the one on adultery and divorce, adultery. And that one is it's very quite clear. You've heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. Yeah, okay. But I say to you, and now this is Jesus. Now, this is not Moses. Some people say, give me Moses. That was better. Now we have Jesus. Jesus is helping us understand that what is in our head is more important. The most dangerous weapon we have is in our head. The young people's largest sex organ is in their head. It starts inside and works out into actions that are harmful. So he says, if whoever looks at another person lustfully has already committed adultery, in their heart. And
Somebody else.
Jesus is, in a sense, unpacking the 10 Commandments. Even at the same time, he's doing two things at once. He's unpacking the 10 Commandments, and he's also showing us what are the deeds that he has in mind that can bring people to say, wow, that man or that woman is different, or that group of people really are different because of the way they're acting toward each other, because of the way they control themselves and behave themselves, because of the way they keep promises. And then he goes on, and also, even the way they handle unfairness in such creative, assertive ways. They even pray for their enemies. I can't believe these people. What have they got? I think that's, in a sense, what's going on here. Jesus gives us 5 or 6 case studies that do two things at once: explain what the good works are and unpack the 10 Commandments. Isn't that kind of ingenious? Those two things are going on together. We got the good works in verse 16, and in verse 19, it was told the greater righteousness is not from breaking the law, but internalizing it, thinking about where problems really start, and saying, okay, examine my own heart, examine my own mind, and see where this is going to lead, and cut problems off at the bud. Don't let things fester. If two people are having out with each other, don't let things just go from bad to worse. Try to make it up. That doesn't mean going to that person and saying, I'll forgive you if you'll forgive me. I mean, yeah, if you if you admit you were wrong, I'll forgive you. No, it doesn't mean that. It doesn't describe that. But so that's what I'm wanting to see in this chapter. And I'm going to invite you this week, as you read chapter 5, to think of it as accomplishing two things at once, illustrating how the 10 Commandments can be part of our lives in a practical, honest way when you unpack them. The reverse of those Russian babushka dolls. You take the big doll out and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Well, Jesus is saying we got reverse babushka dolls here. The little 10 Commandment, the commandment, thou shalt not kill, open it up and a bigger one pops out. Now, and a bigger one pops out. And then you really got something to understand about what God has in mind when he says, you shall not kill. He's really saying, I want you to be a peacemaker. So in the very first commandment, thou shalt not kill, he ends up by pointing out that it's our calling to be a peacemaker. And what did he say? Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. The very first illustration of the good works involves peacemaking. He gives an illustration of it right there. So it's kind of like all woven together. And you keep seeing how the Beatitudes are illustrated in the illustrations, and the 10 Commandments are illustrated in that, and the command to be a light with good works are illustrated in that. Wow, it's really quite amazing, isn't it? How it's all put together, and you can see that this basic identity we have, who we are called to be as a follower of Jesus, we are to be the salt of the earth. We are to be the light of the world. And if we do that the way Jesus understands it, we will have kept the commandments, and we will have been a witness, and God will be working in our lives. But I just want to give one warning. I think I want to say that if there is a kind of progression in these Beatitudes, Bursey, being who he is, often has to go back to the very first one. And he doesn't take his foot off the first rung because he's not a perfect character. He often has to recognize that I have to go back and acknowledge that I am a human being that God is working on, and that I have to acknowledge between God and myself when in my quiet time, there's real room here for growth. So it isn't like you become a perfect person. It's like that is always there. You're always the poor in spirit. You're always recognizing the closer. I like the way Ellen White put it. It was so great. The closer you come to Christ, the more imperfect you will appear in your own eyes. Now, that's the good news. You'll get to see more clearly what you are, but it will always have the result of you being closer to God, and you being a better witness for him of his love. Okay? That's probably as much as I ought to throw at a person in one night, Dale. Isn't that great stuff?
Amen.
Very good. Thank
Can't
you.
believe how well it's put together, is it? And there's so much there. So
Much
probably
more than we
we'll
imagined.
preach on this, and that will be a good thing.
That is great. Anyone want to explore anything with Ernie here? Ask any questions?
Gives you a lot of hope, Ernie.
Good. I'm glad that that's true. We don't want to lose hope. God isn't giving up with us, is he? No. Particularly if we have the attitude of, God, I understand I blew that. I'm sorry. Forgive me. An honest repentance and making things up. That's right. That's important. I have this little phrase I use when I teach students. I may have said this to you before. I asked my students, how many of you played a sport in high school? And when I have a class of 30 students, even right now in graduate school, I've got people who are on the rowing team at Stetson. They have to so many 1,000 meters they have to row a day. I mean, so I said, you're honestly. So how did you get on the team? Well, they tried out for it, and I said, how'd you find out? Well, they put up a sign, or he got a call, or there was a list made up, and we read our names. So you got on the team, and what did that mean? Well, that meant I was in. Somebody said that men can be very, very chivalrous until they land a wife, and then they forget what that means. So, but I want to suggest, don't use that analogy, ladies. I went too far there, I know, but. What I would say is, if you want to think about sports, when you're on the team, you're part of something bigger than yourself. And so because you're on the team, you don't practice less, you practice more. And when you miss a basket, you go back and you figure out, why did that happen? You try to improve your time in that quarter mile or that 200-yard or whatever it is. And I think that's how we have to see this, as these are basically words from the coach about how to get on the team and what the training looks like and what are some of the opportunities for a game that you'll have. Not that you would like those particular opportunities, but they come to everybody anyway. Will I be faithful when it doesn't look easy? Will I keep my promises? Will I be the one to make the initiative if there's a problem? Will I find a creative way when someone's stronger than me to show them love? And then in chapter 6, for next time, if you want to look at it, we get the assurances. You know, the coach says, I'm always here for you. I want you to do your best. We won't win every game the way we want to, but you're on the team and you're in training. And next week we can take a little look at maybe more of the chapter 5, but we'll also notice that in chapter 6 we get a little bit of a reminder. Now, there are those people who think they're playing one kind of game and they think they know the rules because that's what society says religious people do when they want to show off a little bit. And Jesus says, don't show off your religion. Don't ever show off how righteous you are by your prayers, by your offerings, by your fasting. None of that, please. But instead, by the way you treat other people when they don't deserve it, the way you act when it's not easy. Those are the ways that you will be my witness. So chapter 6, if you want to look ahead, he has this amazing statement, which almost looks like a contradiction. If in 5:16 he says, let your light so shine before others that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who's in heaven. Works in front of other people so they can see, so God can get glorified. Go to chapter 6:1. Beware of practicing your good deeds in front of other people. Yeah. And then he says, if you do that, you know, to be seen by them, then you'll have no reward from your Father who's in heaven.
Here.
And you got to ask Jesus, that contradicts. No, it doesn't if you pay attention to what follows. And what follows are 3 kinds of righteous deeds that righteous people often do. Their prayers are impressive. Their offerings are impressive. They make sure they get full credit for that. And their fasting or whatever righteous thing they do, they look pious. They stand on a little platform above other people and they're sanctimoniousness. Jesus said, no, that's not what I had in mind. So he clears that out in chapter 6, verses 1 to 19. And then he starts giving the assurances of why, you know, like the Marines say, we've always got your back. Okay, we'll bring your body back if nothing else. You know, your wife will get you back, even if it's in a body bag. If you're a Marine, we'll never give up. We're out there for you. And I think you see the same thing in the chapter 6. You get this statement, you know, when God has got your back. So this helps people to live a little bit more creatively, a little less defensively, a little less reactively, a little more assertively on behalf of others, stepping up. So that somebody described the Adventists they knew as the quiet giants. I don't know if you're all Adventists or not. It wouldn't make any difference, but Christians are these quiet giants. They're such good people. Now, Jesus didn't have that in mind. He meant you be out blessing people and maybe doing things that other people wouldn't even dream of doing because you believe that you're not doing it for your sake, but doing it for God's sake. Anyway, that's enough to throw at you one night.
Thanks very much, Ernie. I think we're all looking forward to next week.
Well, Dale, keep reading. See if it makes sense. Go back and
Right.
read the chapter, okay?
I'll go
Thank
back
you.
to chapter 5, and
Okay, 5 and 6.
it's fresh in my mind.
All right.
All right, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night. See you later.
The Lord
Good night.
bless between you and me while we're absent, one from
One
another.
from another. Thank you.
Good night.
Good
Night.
night.
Night.